Hi, Anna. Hi, Jana. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you so much. It's very nice.
It looks like you're in the same studio, but you're not.
No.
Not quite. Quite calm spaces you're in, unlike this kind of like waterfall of books behind me. How calm and creative are we feeling right now, Jana?
Well, I think given the circumstances, not too bad. Thank you for asking. But I would say, it's certainly helps to just, I try to focus on the things that are under my control and not to worry too much trying to, predict what's going to happen in the future and like run all the scenarios in my head. So I think that, focusing on what I can do and what's within my control is definitely how I stay calm and creative if I manage.
It's definitely a head over heart thing, that, isn't it? Because we all get the fact that, the classic stoic approach to life of focus on what you can control. You can't control who's the prime minister most of the time, or who's, how the economy's going, or where a war's happening, or whatever. You just can control what you can do day to day. But actually, the reality of that is hard, because we always like pull towards, oh my God, all these things going on in the world. It's really hard. How do you feel about it, Anna, at the moment?
I definitely feel creative at the moment. I've got so many things happening at the same time, and they are all so different. That's kind of pushing my creative streak, which is definitely, I would say, one of the parts of my job that I enjoy the most, like the creative element, all the visual stuff. In terms of calmness, I'd be lying if I said I was completely calm. Even just during the introduction, then I came onto the pre-chat saying, I don't feel calm. And then during the pre-chat, my brother's just run in saying, oh, the internet for the whole office has gone down. Can you quickly hotspot off your phone and rejoin the event? And I'm thinking, no, I definitely can't. Sorry, that's an over there problem. But I'm in a little meeting room within our broader office, and I feel safe and calm within this space. So, I mean, yeah, to be honest, I feel like the way I deal with it is applying humor to any situation and just ultimately laughing my way through it, because sometimes it can just feel like, what more can possibly be thrown at you. But we've got a team which is really young and fun, and we always have a good giggle through these times where it feels like everything's going wrong. So no, not necessarily calm, and to be honest, I won't probably feel calm again until January, but very creative, so I'll take one of the two.
Yeah, and they're not necessarily, they don't necessarily go together, do they, those two things? I think it was Frankie Boyle said this week, the British comedian. He said, the news, they're making the news so bad that when the blackouts come, which may happen to Anna tonight, it'll be a relief. So you're like, oh, we don't even know what's happening anymore. But there's a load of truth in that, right? Which is, when you don't know, you don't know. You just kind of get on with your own world. But we're so connected to the whole world. It feels like these days that everyone's problems feel like, someone way over there is like, oh no, what can I do about this? And we can't. Of course, we can't do everything. But the great thing about entrepreneurship is that we, through choice or accident, we're involved with creating something from nothing. And you've both done that. And you've both created these wonderful stories and projects and ventures. So we'd love to hear a little bit about them. So Jana, maybe if we can start with you, take us back to your life just before Tiny CFO. What were you doing, and what led to the birth of this startup?
Yeah, so thank you for asking. I was freelance doing mostly finance and strategy projects for bigger startups. So just before, I was doing 6 months with Deliveroo on their sort of financial models and things like that. And I was just sort of mentoring entrepreneurs, for fun in my free time. And really, it was just something that I was passionate about when somebody was just starting out, to kind of help them understand the numbers and help them kind of wrap their head around the financial part of it. And what I realized is that, first of all, there were some similar questions that people would always ask. How do I not run out of cash? How do I think about how to price this product? What do I do when the customers don't pay, and things like that. And the other thing that I realized was that, having had some training in these things mostly through my jobs in consulting and in venture capital, I realized that actually a lot of this like corporate finance education is more geared towards professionals who want that to be their career. But if you don't want to be an investment banker when you grow up, it's a little bit harder to find resources that explain it in a really, really simple way that's easy to understand. And I think there is a lot of value to doing that, because really, if you run a business, there is a certain level of financial knowledge that you need to have. And so I really want to make it as fun and as easy to understand as it can be, even if you don't come from a business background, even if you studied graphic design, doesn't matter. I really want this to be really easy for people to kind of take the learnings and just apply them in their business. So that's what I do at Tiny CFO.
And there are 100+ Virgin StartUp community members listening in right now going, yes, where were you, Jana? This is what we need, is someone to translate this chaos and all these fears into simple lessons that we could apply. Tell us briefly about where did you start? What was your first service at Tiny CFO? Who was your first customer, and what did you help them with?
Yeah, so the first thing that I did, and I think many people may relate to this, I don't know if it was easy for you all listening right now to start your business, but I had a very solid panic attack just before launching. And I was like, oh, no way, I can do this.
What was your fear in that moment?
I think it was mostly just, first of all, the classic kind of imposter syndrome. I mean, I've been doing this kind of work for about a decade. With kind of big clients like Deliveroo, Business of Fashion, Rubik's, and so on. But at the same time, I was like, oh, maybe I'm not qualified to talk about this. I don't actually know enough. I should learn more before being able to, talk about it. So that was definitely one thing. The other thing was that I realized how different the audience is, right? So like if you're a small business owner, you don't, you have a different kind of business. It's smaller, maybe you come from like a different knowledge base, right? So I want to make it accessible to you. I don't want this to be only something that's accessible to CFOs or like, the people that I was kind of used to dealing with in my previous life, which was slightly different audience. And so that was definitely my concern. It's like, will I, despite my best efforts, just use a ton of jargon that like nobody will understand? Will people just find it incredibly boring? I get a lot of, oh, finance, that must be really boring. I'm like, no, actually, I want to make it really fun. That's the point. But, there's always this concern that, people would, of course, prefer to be doing absolutely anything else with their time than listening about corporate finance. So yeah, these were, and I still think about these things.
It's mad, isn't it? The imposter syndrome. Anna, I don't know if you suffered from it as well, but we hear this story, or have in the past, so often. And I have to say, it's you hear it a lot more, at least honestly, coming from female founders. And yet, if you look at that, like the evidence of you starting Tiny CFO, you were overqualified to do this role, right? Seriously overqualified. I was at an event the other day, and there were, I try not to stereotype, but there were some tech bros up on stage pitching their next marketplace. Really cool, nice branding, loads of ideas, really exciting, engaging, mad valuation, no revenue, no products. But like we do, and then next there was this young lady pitching this amazing product that had revenue, MVP, great team behind, and evaluation was way down here. And I was like, oh my God, these are the wrong way around. How do you think like we can help people get over this, especially young women who are trying to start business? Like, what would your advice be back to your younger self?
Still, you're asking me?
Yeah, and then we'll come over to Anna. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it is very so the sort of what really helped me was to try to look at it, remove the emotions out of it, and really just say like, okay, technically speaking, yes, I'm qualified. All the things are there. Like if you can try to sort of depersonalize it a little bit and just say, is this really something that I'm not saying I'm the best in the world, but definitely qualified. I think that's a really helpful kind of first step for me. And then the other thing is kind of think about well, what if I don't know something, right? And I think it's always really important to be honest about it. I don't believe in the sort of bullshitting your way through things if you really don't know. So one of the first things that I kind of promised to myself was that if somebody asks me something and I genuinely don't know the answer, and there isn't a right or wrong answer, right? As often there is one, I will just say that, like, I need to look this up. I will find an expert who knows. I'll get back to you. I won't.
That's a great question. That's such an interesting question. I'll go where it's like I get it from my kids all the time. But and I'm like, great question.
But what
honey.
I will not do,
no idea.
What I will not do is just make up an answer, knowing that it may be exactly the wrong thing, and actually can cause trouble if somebody acts on that. So that is something that I just won't do. So I think that helped. And every now and then I reach out to some experts to kind of get some more robust insight into some topic that I don't know.
It's that classic image of the startup entrepreneur, someone like asking on the phone for like, what do you do? And they're just Googling everything and answering them. Anna, did you suffer from imposter syndrome when the idea of UpCircle began?
I guess so, but unlike Jana, I feel like I was probably potentially underqualified. I was only 22, and what I feel like we had was a really, really good idea. It was something that would completely shake up the industry and was different to anything out there. But I was 22, I had no relevant working experience that would help me launch a skincare brand. I mean, I get asked all the time, are you a dermatologist? Are you this? I'm like, no. I, as a teenager, was passionate about skincare and wanted to be a makeup artist, but I fell down that classic trap of thinking, oh God, am I going to make enough money? Is that, my school would have just not had a clue how to advise me to be a makeup artist. So I ended up going down, a bit more of an academic route, and then a fairly more corporate career path in my 1 or 2 years post uni before launching the brand. So at the beginning, sure, I faced that same thing of being the female founder, but also the 22-year-old female founder, going into boardrooms of investors and looking for mentorship from people who've been in the industry for a long time. And those people were almost always men in their 50s and 60s. And the thing that I was basically trying to do with very little experience is say, oh, please invest in me, because I'm not trying to do what you've done. I'm trying to do something completely different and to show that that's the future of the industry. Because at the moment, I don't think the industry is great. And I think consumers like me, I was coming at it from that perspective, want something new and innovative. People are fed up with mascara adverts, advertising a mascara, but then showing people with fake eyelashes on and post-production insert, all the rest of it. People are fed up of the size zero thing, all of that I grew up with as a teenager. People are fed up of face mask adverts where there's literally not a single pore in sight, or an acne treatment where the person has clearly never had a spot in their life, that side of things. And then also the terrible sustainability reputation that the beauty industry has. So, the packaging has got to be better. Formulations have got to be kinder, etc., etc. So I came at it from a very different standpoint, because I was not trying to convince anyone that I had tons of industry experience or was a certified dermatologist or any of that. I was just trying to say that I've got a really innovative and forward-thinking idea that I can apply to this industry and create, amazing creative products. And I need you to trust that sure, this might not work, but at least we'll have done something different, which hasn't happened in the beauty industry in quite a while, in my opinion. So definitely imposter syndrome in some ways, but I wasn't someone who I knew I didn't have tons of experience. I was only 20.
and you use that to your advantage, as well as being courageous. You just like, hey, here I am. I don't know how it works, but this is the idea. So Anna, tell us a bit more about the idea of UpCircle back in 2016. What was it back then?
Yeah, so the idea basically came from wanting to save coffee from being disposed of at landfill sites. So I co-founded the business with my brother. He comes from a finance background, and my background was in logistics. So I worked as an area manager for a supermarket. So I had some some relevant knowledge there, you know, turnover of stock and warehousing and all the rest of it. And I still to this day manage our warehouse teams now. So that's definitely something that's carried across. But it was on his way to his previous job that my brother would always go into the same coffee shop. He asked the barista, what happens with the puck full of coffee grounds that you tap out with every single coffee cup that you make? And was shocked when he found out that they have to pay local councils to have this used coffee disposed of at landfill. All of a sudden, there's your problem. It's that classic thing of problem and solution. Me, with my experience in skincare and interest in skincare, I should say, not experience, said, you know, coffee scrubs are an amazing product, but no one on the market makes them from used coffee grounds. So why don't we start collecting up coffee from cafes and turning it into exfoliators? And that's pretty much exactly what we did. While still employed in our previous jobs, we'd go to, you know, weekend markets and stalls and places like the London Coffee Festival selling exfoliators that we had made from coffee grounds that we'd collected from cafes. And that basically became our concept, that in every single skincare product that we make, we will infuse upcycled ingredients that we have intercepted from other industries at the point at which they would have disposed of them. But ingredients that are of no lesser quality and ingredients that have proven benefits for your skin. So fast forward to now, and we work with over 20 different upcycled ingredients, and we've turned that circular approach not only to the ingredients but also to the packaging, running a full packaging return scheme across every product in our range as well. So circularity is kind of our thing, and that's what we do, and we apply it to skincare. We've got, you know, tons of products now, and it's going really well, and it's really exciting. But yeah, it's been a roller coaster journey.
I'm sure it has, and I do, when I listen to both of you like share these stories, even though I know about them, like hearing it from you, and you just like get excited all over again about like these birth of these ideas. And Anna, with UpCircle, like tell us just briefly, let's geek out on that first product. So for those of us that don't understand natural skincare beauty, like how do you take use coffee granules and turn it into an exfoliating product that's good for our skin?
Well, to be honest, our new product development process is very unique. And what I love most about it is that it's very collaborative. You know, we're linking together industries that wouldn't necessarily have previously had a link, because the ingredients that we're intercepting come from all over the place, largely the food and beverage industry, but each one has a unique provenance and a unique story. So with the example of coffee, you know, we have someone who goes by bike to our coffee suppliers every single day. They collect up the coffee that has been produced in that one day, and then it's heavily filtered and kind of processed before being sent to our manufacturers, who add the other ingredients in the very next day. All skincare products in the UK have to go through the same legal testing. So there's like stability testing and efficacy testing, things like that, to ensure that they are safe for use. But we've got manufacturers that are all based in the UK. So we've got 3 different ones now, depending on what product's being made. But they're all Soil Association certified, and everything's handmade. And you know, you really get that kind of love and attention that goes into each one. But the process is very different. I feel like the coffee is probably the most complex, but now upcycling has become a much more mainstream thing. There are whole ingredient suppliers that kind of help out with that initial bit of processing for us. So yeah, it's complex, but it's getting easier.
Oh, this is such a fascinating like world that we could dive into extensively, but we haven't got time for now. Just tell us briefly, what are the top 2 upcycled raw materials that you're using at the moment?
So our best seller would be our face moisturizer, which uses upcycled argan powder, which is a byproduct of producing argan oil, which is used largely in like hair care. And then we've also got olive stone powder, which is in our face mask, which is one of the other ingredients that people love, which is packed with antioxidants. And as you can imagine, that's a byproduct of producing olive oil, and we get that from Andalusia in Spain.
Wow. This is how all we were lucky to chat with the founders of Bybi Beauty, BYBI Beauty, who I'm sure you know, about their building a carbon negative beauty brand. And of course, you just think when you listen to business examples from a financial point of view, Jana, you listen to business examples of UpCircle and Bybi and Oddbox, who we've also spoken to, and you're using waste products to deliver a service that we know is in huge demand every day by people. You just think these businesses are going to be overnight successes. But of course, we know that the execution is so hard. give me if I come back to you, Jana, and I'd love to hear more about where you're at now and in a moment. But if someone like Anna and her brother came to you early on, how would you help them like figure out their finances?
Well, I did have a look at both, their profiles, and I know that they don't need me. But if somebody, comes and kind of the typical question, I think that people need to get right as soon as possible in the beginning is the pricing one. So really just understanding, how much it costs you to make each product, and make sure that you price things accordingly, that you're able to, that you're not losing money from each product that you sell, right? That you're making money from each product that you sell. So I think that's really, really important to get right. And then the other thing is really to think about, especially if you sell physical products, if you have inventory, if you do beauty, fashion, things like that, is to really understand your cash cycle. So to make sure that you're not in a position where you are, let's say you're selling to big chains and they pay you really, really late, but you have to pay for all your materials upfront, because that's a really difficult place to be.
Because you're taking all the risk.
You're taking all the risk. And basically what happens is that, you need to spend cash like way before you manage to collect any of it from your customers. And I think that's something that maybe you don't think about, but that's how actually companies that are in beauty, fashion, and similar, when they're doing really well, they're growing and they're, the business is going well, that's how they sometimes go out of business, because you have these like increased volumes, but the cash flow is just really not working. So that's something that I would really make sure that the company kind of gets right. And because then
it's golden advice, and it's one of those ones when you look back, I made this mistake so many times, that you're like, hang on a second, these people are working so hard on building these businesses, they're delivering a great service. And it comes back to the imposter syndrome. Sometimes they can't separate the pricing, the value of what they're doing, from their personal confidence, right? So how do you help people figure that pricing thing out? Because you can price by product plus a bit on top, whatever you think it should be. You can price by competitor, try and sit somewhere in the middle, so or like not too far from the bottom. Or you can do the hardest way of pricing, which is price on value to the customer, which could mean you have a huge margin, or maybe you don't have a margin, in which case you don't have a business case. Is that the sort of model that you use to help people figure this out? Or because it feels like such a fundamental part of the jigsaw to get right early on.
Yeah, so I mean, without getting into too much detail here, I think what is really important, if you have inventory, if you buy physical goods that you then sell, whether you buy raw materials, whether it's fashion, you actually buy the fabrics or you manufacture, you always have to understand the cost of that and know that's the floor, right? The cost plus margin is the floor that you really need to understand. Even if you're selling services, right? These services, there are probably people that you employ or freelancers you work with who deliver these services. So you really need to understand that, I think, always. And, there is no such thing, well, in theory, maybe, but we don't want to go there, like a perfect price, right? But there is like a healthy range, right? At the top of that range is whatever people are still willing to pay, right? If it's way too, above that, then nobody's buying, right? So that doesn't work. So at the top of that range is whatever people are willing to pay. And at the bottom of that range, that's your cost plus the margin. Not just your cost, right? Sometimes people, as you said, are not confident and are worried, and they're like, oh, I will just about cover my costs. Obviously, that doesn't work. You need to put at least something on top. So I think, just to help people understand that there is a range, a price that's kind of financially healthy for their business. I think that's a really good first step.
Of course, the psychology of pricing and sales is a lifelong sort of learning curve, right? But that's a great introduction to it, Jana. And Anna, we're seeing today, it's like on the BBC homepage right now, made.com, which is one of the great kind of retail businesses of the last decade, is going into administration, and founded by Brent Hoberman, who's like a legend in the kind of entrepreneurial space. So if you want a cheap sofa, jump on there now. But like at UpCircle, when you see these stories and you see the recession word and you see that, how do you deal with that in your industry and in your work? Because you're connected to all these different supply chains. Do you see the price point rocketing over there and have to react quickly, or like where does that come into your field of vision, or do you just block it all out until you start to see the customers drop off?
Yeah, deny. No, I mean, we see it in everything that we do. I feel like basically since the outbreak of COVID, nothing has like that's nothing stopped in that regard. It's been one thing after another, and we've had to really, like, I guess, just kind of don the entrepreneurial caps again in order to figure out these issues. As you can imagine, for someone like us, we have a circular supply chain. We rely on the functioning of other industries. So when interest in our products absolutely skyrocketed as everyone returned home and stopped buying makeup and started focusing on skincare and self-care and pampering themselves at home, etc., our sales went flying through the roof. But everything else became infinitely more difficult and more expensive. And that was okay. Now the supply chain is the overarching thing that continues, whether it's a typhoon or a war or a barge stuck on a canal. The main issue we have is keeping our products in stock. But then, of course, there's this economic crisis, and consumers are extremely concerned about actually being able to afford products. And some of our products, like an SPF, actually have safety aspects attached to them. So when it came to us and kind of deciding our price point, I was always very passionate about us undercutting our competitors. That's where we decided to price ourselves. Okay. Because the whole point is a bit like proving, I don't have loads of experience, but I think this represents the future. My other frustration, and the thing that I wanted to prove, is that you could have all of the credentials that other people have, whether that's vegan, cruelty-free, organic, handmade, UK made, etc. We check all of those boxes that everyone else is claiming, but we also do it for a fraction of the price, because I want to prove that it can be done. Because for a young consumer, particularly if you're a student and you've got loads of values, you want to buy products that are in alignment with those values, but how on earth are you going to afford a daily moisturizer that's like 60, 70 quid? And why should you? The point is, you shouldn't have to, because they don't need to be that expensive. And to be honest, what we've always done when times get tough is just absorb the pinch ourselves. We don't pass that down our supply chain, and we don't increase our prices. So despite the fact, and we're seeing our competitors do this left, right, and centre, and I do understand why, don't get me wrong. We have made a commitment to maintain our prices where they're at, and we just take a smaller margin. So these are things that, but that's one of our kind of non-negotiables as a brand, and every brand has different non-negotiables and different priorities. For us, keeping our products as affordable as they possibly can be is right at the top. So that wasn't a sacrifice that I was kind of willing to make, to say, oh, sorry, everyone, the prices have gone up 20% in line with inflation. Instead, we just kind of have to take that hit on our profits.
I love that answer, Anna, for a couple of reasons. One, because it just shows, the clarity of your focus on like values and like what we won't negotiate on. And then you just like keep putting it into practice, and it's a belief system and it builds trust with suppliers and customers. And it echoes a talk that I went to last week by the CEO of Iceland Supermarket, Richard Walker, who's a brilliant like modern leader, and he talks about the fact that we can fulfill these social and environmental goals, which we have to as modern businesses, without compromising on quality of product. So at Iceland, they have, their customer has an average of £25 a week to spend on feeding a family of 4, which to some people in this audience might sound like a wildly low number, but that's the reality of his customer base, and it always has been. And yet he's still cutting out single-use plastics, palm oil, making sure there's a minimum wage, like, plus a fair wage for everyone, all his employees. And he's proving it's possible. And he said this will be the first year they break even. So times are really tough, but they've always made a profit. So I love that vision and mission that you've got at UpCircle, Anna, even though that creates stress. So coming on to the challenges that, like, working hard on the numbers, having this strong mission, and trying to stick by it, but with quite a lot of vulnerability, because, you know, even though Iceland has a lot of risks, it's a big business, right? We're tiny. How do you deal with the stresses? So Anna, at UpCircle, you mentioned just before we went live, that you've got a whole list of things that you're dealing with at the moment. You're creating lots of cool stuff, which is fun. But how do you deal with the volume of work, the being pulled in different directions, and the general stresses in your business?
Oh, I don't think I've got the perfect answer to it, to be honest. I think it's my brother and I often describe going to work like going into battle every day. And you wake up in the morning and it's like, all right, here we go, what we're going to face. I think ultimately, I feel very lucky that we are a family business, and that doesn't just end with my brother. Sure, like, don't get me wrong, it's also the worst part of it, because when things are tough, you're like, oh wow, this could seriously impact us in a big way. But we can rely on each other more than I think you could if it were a friend or a stranger or something like that. And we do get things faster, and we cut through all of the politeness, and it's just, we can be very, very frank with one another. I think it's really important. Again, I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but the main thing is to have your non-negotiables. And we've got a younger sister who's also decided to start a business, and she's much fresher into that journey. And part of me was like, oh, going down the, are you seriously sure about this route? And then the other part of me feels like, there's so much that we can share with regards to how to make it work and how to make it genuinely fun. Because despite the fact that it can be stressful, of course it's going to be stressful, I still would not change it for the world. I would not undo this. I would not want to swap my job for any other job on the planet. So there's no regrets there, but you have to have your non-negotiables. You have to really firmly put those in place as well. And those are different for me and William, the other co-founder. So he's a dad. He's got 2 toddlers and another baby on the way due in January. I'm in a slightly different phase of my life, but in the week, for example, I have to have at least one social with my friends. And on the weekend, I'm happy, sometimes when times are tough, we're in November, I know full well I'm going to have to do some weekend working. But there have to be things where you say, regardless of how serious the work thing is, I have to maintain that work-life balance. And 2 years in, you can easily say, oh, it's going to get better 3 years in. And then 3 years in, you say, oh, it'll be easier 5 years in. But to be honest, I haven't found that, we've got more people in place, we've got whole systems that can deal with things, but the issues change. They don't go away, they just turn into something different that you have to deal with as a founder. So having the things in your personal life, the things that recharge your sanity batteries, which I often refer to, are the things that you just simply cannot let be pushed back down to the bottom of the priority list. If you can keep that in place, and that will be different for everyone, whether that's cooking home cooked meals or going out with your friends or going on holiday X amount of days per year, make sure you know what those are and do not let them slide.
Yeah. A lot of wisdom there, only a few years in, but there you go. Starting a business is a fast, it's like 10 MBAs in a few years. Yeah, it's so true. And sticking to the non-negotiables is where the accountability with your partner or whoever it is so crucial. We'll come back to creativity in a minute, but Jana, with finance and stress, for most people go hand in hand. So at this time of extra stress, because people feel pressures from things they can't control, and it's in the news every day, and like the government's all over the place, and tax rules are changing, and it's really like there are a lot of reasons not to start a business right now, it seems, in mainstream storytelling of what's going on in the world and in our country. So how can we take some of the stress out of our relationship with money, especially around our businesses?
So 2 things here. I think, first of all, in terms of like not starting a business, I would counter that with some of the best businesses out there and most successful ones were starting during recessions. And there is a theory behind why that works, is because if you start in a time like this, or if you experience early on as a business time like this, when it may be harder to sell, where it may be harder to convince customers to buy from you, where there is a bit of a, everybody's kind of like a little bit more reluctant, I guess, or has less discretionary spending. Recession is a phase, and this too shall pass. And so then, as the economy recovers, as it inevitably will, and you have that sort of battle-tested value proposition from the recession, that's when you then do really, really well. There, a sort of counterexample to that can be somebody who starts a company when times are really, really good, maybe raises a ton of venture capital, because we knew that, venture capital was sort of all-time high very recently. And then as the recession hits, all of a sudden you realize, like, oh, you have an unprofitable company. There is no more VC funding coming your way, and you just implode, right? So I think this is actually a really good start to a really good time to be at the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey. And I would try to kind of see it as an advantage, even if it's, sometimes it feels very painful maybe, but I think it can be an advantage. In terms of taking the stress out of it, I think transparency is key. So just knowing your numbers, like knowing the basic things, what to look at. I think there is, whenever we get nervous or insecure, it's very human, very natural to just be like, I don't want to look at it. I don't want to, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to, I experienced these things as well. Like I had times when I was like, I don't want to look at my numbers. I know it's bad, that happens to everybody. And I think it takes a bit of discipline and a bit of, just like being able to face it in the first place, like to be able and to know that, if genuinely you don't know what to look at, if you can't read your own financial statements, if you can't read your own management accounts, if you don't know what your margins are, then step by step kind of start building that transparency. Ask your accountant, like, hey, what does this mean? What does that mean? Have them explain it to you. Come to Tiny CFO course or something like that, but like start building that knowledge. There is a lot of information out there on the internet, so it's definitely possible to kind of learn these things without me, for sure. But I think it's really important to just like have the really basic kind of the ABCs of understanding what to look at in your numbers. And then once you have that, it's much, I think, easier to feel on top of it and to not get completely overwhelmed, because it's not just this big kind of unknown. It's a little bit more clear, hopefully.
Yeah, and it's a great answer. And I think it's why we, it's so often when I've met founders, you kind of say, well, when you had your first idea, what did you do? Like, how did you start to download the thoughts onto paper or somewhere? And they said, oh, I drew something, like I drew a diagram. Or the other person is like, I wrote a story. Or someone else is like, I started building a web page. Very few people start with, I wrote down the numbers on the back of an envelope or a beer mat or like on a Google Doc. And yet, so that my way used to be always like, I'm going to create like a visualization of this idea. I'm going to make a brand, basically. That's what I used to do. But very quickly, I was like, I don't know if this can work in any shape or form unless I do a quick validation on the numbers. And of course, you're making all the numbers up, but you can at least get some reality fed in straight away. It's like, what's the cost of this? What's that? If I've got the coffee granules and I put the other products in, and like, what would I need to sell it for? And then my time. And then suddenly you've got like, oh, here's a first version. And I think that's a habit that reduces that anxiety that you talked about very quickly. And your point about anxiety going up when we ignore when it's bad, it's so true. Like, even when the numbers are bad and we know that we're going to like, let's crunch them and see what the reality tells us, it feels better, even though the reality doesn't look great. It feels better than not knowing. So it's such a good reminder, Jana, of keeping on top of it. And that's what I'm so much happier these days working with apps like Zero and like all these other sort of startup financial services like your own and Virgin StartUp, because it just like, I know there are like easy ways to like, you don't have to be this brilliant Google Excel wizard to do this well. So yeah, great reminder. Thank you. Let's talk a bit about being creative, because this to me is almost the other side of the coin, right? If you can find space to be creative, it actually, a lot of the stresses go away. And for entrepreneurs, it's where we're at our best. It's why we want to do something. We want to create something out of nothing. So Anna, you said at the start, you're in like creative mode around a lot of things at the moment. What does that mean?
Yeah, I feel like it falls under many categories and it manifests itself in many different ways. So obviously, you know, designing a physical product is you can't even see that because it's bleached, but it has a lot of creative elements that go into it. The branding journey for me is so much fun. What's the packaging going to look like? Hierarchy of messaging, what we're going to put on the front of pack, what we're going to put on the top of pack, what's the most important messaging in the funnel, and how does that trickle down? And then let's change a variable. Who are we pitching this to? Are we looking at busy mums? Are we looking at our mature audience? Are we looking at the Gen Z and the TikTokers? How does that change things? And then there's that all comes into the sort of physical side of things. And then the other side, which has only, I think as our brand has got bigger and more sort of social, cultural issues are happening in the world, that was a really scary shift for me, because all of a sudden it was not just the creative side of making our actual product, but it's the creative side of, well, who are we as a brand? When do we choose to speak up about issues that are not just in the skincare field? And what's our voice? And what do we do? Like, what are the actions that we take on things that are happening beyond just the products that we make? Because I think you kind of hit a threshold as a brand where you almost start to be called upon by your customers to engage, really.
Isn't it wild though? Isn't it wild though? You're like putting alarms like, oh, I wonder, oh yeah, I can see there's this massive outbreak of violence around racism in America. I wonder what my nut butter brand thinks of that on Instagram. We kind of say that in jest, but I think actually what's so exciting, and obviously loads of brands do this really badly, especially the bigger brands that feel like they should, but they fuck it up badly. But I also think it's quite an exciting time from a creative point of view to say, well, here are our values. This, of course, makes sense because we all live in this world and we're trying to make sense of it. So we can share what we think about it. But how do you navigate that, Anna? Because it is, how do you choose what issues to speak up about?
It's really difficult, and it's something that, to be honest, I think as a brand we do well. And I think the reason we do it well is because we always do it as authentically as we possibly can, and with complete self-awareness of who we are and who we're not, and what we do and what we don't do, and sort of our position in the grand scheme of things. Of course, Black Lives Matter was probably the first major thing that we were called upon to speak up about. And, you know, no way are we going to be doing the black square thing and then wiping our hands of it and saying that's that. So instead, you know, our first statement is okay, we need to, you know, think about this so that we are not just doing a black square. We don't want to be performative. We want to sort of acknowledge our position in this and then do something tangible that could actually, you know, help in some way. Also, again, coming back to the fact that we are a skincare brand and we can't change the world, but we can't do nothing, sort of thing. And then we apply that sort of same logic to whatever the issue might be, and we design campaigns around action rather than words. And they're always a kind of, you know, big discussion among our team. And again, it goes back to how lucky you almost are to be a team of this size. And we're 20 people, we're only 6.5 years into our journey, and I appreciate that it's much easier for people like us to be bold and to be quite unapologetic and to take risks. We're recently designing our first TV campaign, and when we were speaking to different TV agencies, saying that we really want to go as bold as possible, they were just absolutely buzzing because particularly when you're at the scale of doing TV commercials, you're normally dealing with bigger corporate brands where you've got to go through one board into another board into another board, and all of the creativity is sort of washed out through that process. Whereas we were like, push us, like we're happy to be bold, you make us go bolder. Yes, we're selling skincare, but you can show people diving in bins and all the rest of it. Like, we want to grab attention ultimately, and we're very lucky to still be able to do that. But it's something that I think that as we get bigger, I feel passionately about maintaining that boldness as much as we possibly can. But that's one of the creative sides of my role, which has been something that I didn't necessarily predict right at the beginning, that I'm going to be designing, incredibly careful campaigns around things that, to be honest, what is the right answer? There is no right answer. They're very, very difficult. But that's something that I think that we do well, and I continue to enjoy trying to construct.
I think it's like genuinely wonderful to hear that, and actually channeling creativity through an exciting startup. Yeah, that's a beauty product, but look, you are trying to turn waste into something that's really useful and valuable to people, and make it at an affordable price, and trying to engage with issues that matter to your audience and to you as a team, and to do that in a creative way. I think it's really, really exciting, and it's not easy, but it's great. I'm excited about I can't wait to get your sort of lasagna juice product from a bin behind a supermarket on sale.
Have you seen any of the April Fool's campaigns that we've done? That's one day in every year, which is just the most fun. The year before last, we told everyone that we were going to be making an oat milk cleanser from the milk left at the bottom of people's cereal bowls, and that if they DM us, we'll send them a free post label, but the only T&C is that it has to be vegan cereal and it has to be vegan milk. And we were flooded. I'm talking hundreds and hundreds. Even our branding agency contacted us in a panic, being like, guys, I'm not sure about the messaging on this. I'm not sure how we're going to communicate this. It seems a bit unsanitary. And we're like, are you serious? I actually fell for it. And then last
you
year,
got the most customer insight ever from one April Fool's.
Now we know how far we can push it.
Yeah, well, we're going to check those out after this. We're running out of time. I feel like I could speak to you all evening, but Jana, I wanted to come back to you on, like, creativity and numbers aren't obvious bedfellows friends, right? But tell us a little bit why maybe you think that's not the case. Do you believe that creativity and finance, without like the idea of like cooking the books, because that's a whole nother level, but like genuinely in terms of like creating successful businesses, do creativity and finance, can they go together?
I think they must. In order to create a successful business, I think you have to, if you are coming at it from 100% creative background, if that's your natural kind of predisposition, then I think pushing yourself slightly to understand the numbers well enough that you can run the business, I think is essential. But I think at the same time, I definitely know people who are, super comfortable with numbers, and they feel completely lost around topics like branding, messaging. That is something that I personally, I was missing in, my previous jobs. I felt like, oh, well, there is this part of me that likes writing. There is a part of me that likes branding. There is, and I don't really have an outlet for that if all I do is P&L forecasts day in, day out. And I, for me, it was really nice that when I started my company, I hope that the branding kind of worked out. Obviously, I didn't do the branding. I don't really have the skill set, but I had a vision for what I wanted to be. And I really wanted to, communicate that this topic can be exciting and interesting and fun. And I think, if I was only maybe talking about numbers, and if it was all very, very, technical and numbers focused, then maybe it wouldn't actually resonate. So I think I needed that push towards greater creativity. So I think, you really need to, I think, strike a bit of a both, even if, I think, the vision is obviously super, super important, but I think you need a bit of both to make it work.
I 100% agree. And building on that, I also think that communicating numbers in creative ways is a really important skill. So you look at data visualizations. I mean, we went through that like crazy time of COVID lockdowns and all that top-down communication of data from governments, which on the whole was terrible, wasn't it? the next slides, please. And there's like designers of like decks and brand stories. We all go, what the fuck is going on, people? Like, get these. They needed Tiny CFO and like UpCircle in the room right there. But also you look at this incredible data visualizations that you take complex data around like climate change, or, I look at things like donut economics and breaking boundaries and these Netflix docs and just go, wow, this is like quite hardcore science, making it accessible for the masses. And we need it. We need that education. So I'm really excited about the way numbers and data and like visualizations have come together. The best one I saw this year was the Leonardo DiCaprio, when he had he broke up with his like 12th girlfriend under the age of 25, and someone had done this like whole graph of like all his girlfriends' bar charts and it was this like beautiful piece of data visualization. Anyway, on that note, I just want to say a big thank you to Jana from Tiny CFO and Anna from UpCircle, in amongst the chaos of modern life, creating what you've both done, and spending time with us this evening. I feel calmer, but also more creative. Thank you for being with us. Everyone, check out and support and follow. Pass on the links to whoever might love these brands and services. And yeah, we're excited to see what happens next in both your journeys. Thank you.
Thank you so much.